Oh yeah, splitting wood with the Acevolt Campower 2000 and my portable electric log splitter. Wait till you guys see what this little thing can do. Now Acevolt did send me over one of these for testing and review, but if you guys are interested after watching this video and think you could use one of these, I'll leave a link down below in the description so you guys can pick one of those up. It is an affiliate link and I will make a small commission if you guys do use that, so keep that in mind. But thanks for helping support the channel. Now let's see what this thing can do. Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be taking a look at this massive portable power station. This is the Acevolt Campower 2000. Now I say it's portable, but it does weigh a pretty hefty 49 pounds, and that's because of the big 1,997 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery that this thing has inside. Now that is one of the best battery chemistries that you can currently get in power stations. You get a massive amount of recharges out of those batteries, and they are way safer than lithium ion batteries, so really nice to see that technology here. And this battery is rated for recharging over 3,500 times, which way outperforms lithium ion batteries. All right, so one of the first awesome features about this huge portable power station is that it charges at 1,100 watts and will charge up completely from 0 to 100% in 2 hours off the wall charger. Now the brick is included in this thing. All you need is the AC cable to plug into this thing into your wall. Now you do want to keep in mind that when you're charging this thing, if you have like a small portable generator that you wanted to charge this thing up with, it may not work. I have a 1,000 watt generator that would not charge this. It kept kicking off, kicking back on, kicking off, kicking back on. It never threw the breaker on the generator, but I shut it down because I didn't want to ruin anything. So keep that in mind, that you do need some pretty good wattage to charge this thing, but it is super nice that it charges in just 2 hours. You can also charge this thing from solar panels. It'll take up to 500 watts, 50 volts of input, which is really nice. You can run your solar panels in parallel or a lot of them in series, and it still be compatible with this power station because it goes up to 50 volts. Now the max I was able to get into this out of my current solar panels that I have was about 18.2 amps, but it does also accept up to 20 amps of current as well, which is another really nice to see feature, that it's not capped out at like 10 or 15 amps. So you can get a really good amount of power into this thing. Now when you're putting solar into these things, you never want to go over the voltage. You can go over the amperage and it's only going to take in what it needs to charge as far as amps go, but voltage, you don't ever want to over voltage your portable solar generators because you will burn something out in them, so keep that in mind. When I parallel my solar panels together, I'm somewhere in the 40-some volt range, so it is still perfectly fine to use with this generator like that, which is really, really nice. So another awesome feature about this thing is it has UPS mode, which means it's an uninterrupted power supply. So you can have this thing running, say like a computer or maybe a sump pump. If you have a sump pump in your basement like I do, and you're afraid of a power outage, if you were away from home and you were afraid that you know, maybe the power was going to go out and your sump pump would quit running and your basement floods, well, this thing has a backup to where it'll run off the AC without using the batteries of this thing if you have it plugged in, and then if the power goes out within like 10 milliseconds, it automatically switches over and runs off this unit, and then when your power kicks back on, it will automatically kick back onto the grid power and charge this thing back up. Now there is a limitation to that. You can only run up to 1,100 watts of power when you're using it in UPS mode. Now if you were using it in standard mode, you can run stuff up to 2,000 watts off of this thing, and it peaks out at 4,000. But 2,000 watts is a pretty good amount of power, guys, and it'll run a lot of things, including my little portable log splitter, which I'll show you guys here in a little bit. So that's one thing that's actually really nice, because way up there I have a wood pile and my little log splitter is electric, and I either would have to take a pretty big generator up there to run it, or I would have to bring the logs down here to split them, which a lot of times I have a fire down here, so it's no big deal. But now I could take this thing up there with my little log splitter and split all my wood up there if I wanted to, which is a really nice feature, because none of my other power stations, my OPEZ 1200 will not run that log splitter, and that's the second biggest power station that I have, but this thing has no problem running it. So I also ran a shallow well pump off of this thing for about 45 minutes. I was transferring about 300 gallon of water from my downspout container up to my garden, and it ran flawlessly for like 45 minutes at right under 900 watts until all that water was transferred. This thing also ran my electric hot water cooker, So if the power goes out and I need to make coffee, I can make coffee easily. This thing will run a coffee pot, no problem. It'll run that water cooker to, you know, make oatmeal or things like that if you need hot water, tea, whatever. So jumping up to a unit this size does definitely give you some different capabilities to be able to use things like that, to be able to use a small hot plate or, you know, coffee pots and things like that. So really nice to see, even though this thing's a little bit heavier and not as portable, it's nice when you need it for certain scenarios. Now this does have pass-through charging, so you can use your AC or your DC while this thing is charging, which is a really nice feature, either while it's charging from solar or while it's charging from AC. So I tested the phantom power draw on this. I made notes of it. So on the DC power draw for the phantom power draw, so if this thing's running and the DC's on and it's not pulling any current, you're still going to use about 4% in 8 hours. Now after those 8 hours, this unit did shut off. However, I plugged it into one of my coolers and ran that thing flawlessly for way over 8 hours and it never shut off. So it must know to stay on if it's sensing a voltage, and if not, it must shut off after 8 hours, I'm assuming. So it used about, in my calculation, maybe around 10 watt hours per hour just off of the DC being on with no power draw. So basically phantom power draw. And then with the AC inverter on, I did the same test to see how much wattage or how many percent it would use for just the AC inverter to be on. And the phantom power draw from that was about 8% loss in 7 hours. So according to my calculations, based on what this unit is supposed to be, is about 23 watt hours per hour to have the AC inverter on. Now you're always going to get some energy losses from that inverter when you're going from AC to DC, so that's normal. Some of my power stations have a pretty big phantom power draw, like the Blue Eddy that I reviewed, and this one didn't seem too bad for the size of the unit. So I was pretty happy with that, especially the DC. There really was minimal power draw on that. So now, even though this thing is rated at 1,997 watt hours, according to the testing that I did, I drained it watching my 55-inch TV, and it was pulling around 80 to 120 watts. And I ran that thing for over 15 hours. It used 1,270 watt hours. Now, like I said, over the course of 15 hours, it probably used about 16% capacity just from the AC inverter being on. And I still didn't get nowhere near what I thought I should have out of it as far as the watt hours go, but I was also using a very minimal 80 to 120 watts. If I was using some higher wattage devices like my water cooker and the log splitter and things like that, I'm sure I would have got more power out of it, but I think it was just because it was over such a long period of time that it did use a little bit extra wattage. So I'm going to do some further testing, and if I come up with any new numbers, guys, I'll put it down below in the description or in the comments to let you guys know my updated numbers. And the DC output did seem to be pretty regulated. Whenever the battery was fully charged, I had 13.55 volts, and when it was at 1%, I was down to 12.96 volts. So it's going to be somewhere between 12.96 to 13.55 volts, and that's pretty good in my opinion. That seems to be pretty regulated there. So really nice to run most of your 12 volt devices off of that. So up here on the front, you also have a LED light, which isn't super bright. It'll light up enough to, you know, fumble around through your cords to make sure you're plugging things in to the front of here or plugging your devices in. It's just a little glow in front of the unit, and it does have a SOS mode and also a flash mode. So a few different modes there. It will light up a room, but it's not going to be super bright. So the light's not super impressive. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit brighter on here, something a little bit bigger, but then again, this unit's so heavy, you're not going to be carrying it around using it as a flashlight anyway. But even some of my smaller power stations have some pretty nice bright LEDs on them, which, like I said, I would have liked to have seen in this. All right, so up here on the front of the unit, you have two USB-A ports, 5 volt, 2.4 amps, two quick charge 3.0 ports, and two USB Type-C 100 watt PD outputs. Now these are only outputs, they're not inputs. That would have been nice to see these being in and out so that you could charge the unit from these. You have your power button here. You do have a 12 volt 10 amp cigarette lighter output, and you also have an XT60 10 amp output next to that. And you have two 12 volt 5521 ports that are only rated for 3 amps apiece. That would have been really nice to see 10 amps each on these as well. So you really can't power anything over 3 amps off of these little inputs here, but at least you got 10 amps on the XT60 and 10 amps on the 12 volt cigarette lighter port. So over here on this side, you have 6 AC outputs, which you can output up to 2,000 watts combined out of these 6 outputs here. And then on the other side, we have an Anderson connector right here for your solar input and the port for your charge cable. Now what's really nice is that charge cable doesn't have to have a brick, it just has a cord. You don't have to carry an additional accessory around with you, just that small cable to charge this thing. And like I said, it will charge in like 2 hours. That's pretty much the specs and features of this Acevolt Campower 2000. But let me show you guys what it can do now running a log splitter. All right guys, so like I said, this thing's a little heavy, so you might want to wheel it around on a dolly if you have to carry it too far. But let's go split some wood. All right, so I got the log splitter plugged into the side of the Acevolt. Go ahead, bud. Let's see how much power this thing uses and if it can split this log. Oh yeah, no problem. All right guys, now I tried this before, but we're gonna try it again with the Opez. Go ahead. Yep, see, it already threw an error, E01. So even though this is rated at 1200 watts and it looked like it was drawing less than 1200 watts, that initial start power, it won't allow the Opez to run it, but the Acevolt runs the log splitter without any issues. Back to the Acevolt. All right guys, so now this thing has 2 fans on each side. It has 2 that take the air in and 2 that push the air out. And I believe there's a fan inside on the DC converter as well, possibly, because I noticed when I was running the DC, sometimes there would be a fan that kicked on that seemed pretty loud. Now these fans didn't seem too bad as far as noise goes, but that DC fan it did seem a little bit loud to me. Overall guys, this thing has a lot of cooling capabilities with those fans, and there is a overload protection button here, like a physical circuit breaker, which is also pretty nice to see. And as you can see, this thing has really good power output, and if you guys are interested in one of these, like I said, I'll leave a link down below in the description where you guys can see more information or to pick one up, along with any coupon codes that I can get. I appreciate you guys watching. Please leave a comment down below. It really helps my channel out. And don't forget to subscribe and hit them notifications so I can see you guys around on the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone.